Spring's finally arrived here in Northeast Ohio. Hey cats, what's happening? It's a beautiful day. I'm gonna take a ride today. Before I do that though, we can chat for a little bit. Step into the man cave here. You know, with spring here, we also see like this, all of a sudden, you start seeing all these road kills out on the street. You know, raccoons, possum, muskrats. Don't have any armadillos around here, but even, you know, deer have been hit over the winter. But a lot of these animals are coming out of hibernate not right now. So, you know, and that always baffles me is like, why are they attracted to the road? You know, they've got hundreds of acres of woodland around, and for some reason they congregate in the road and get whacked by vehicles. It's one thing that is a concern when you're on a motorcycle. You know, nobody wants to hit a critter on a motorcycle, no matter what it is. You know, I told you a story a long time ago about a guy that I knew, and he would boast at the biker bar that he was on his Harley going like 70 mile an hour, and a deer jumped in front of him and he hit it, and he claims that he split the deer in half and he just kept going, and there was no damage to his bike. So it sounds kind of like a big tall tale to me, and I would pretty much be sure that was the fact, but he swears by it and says it was a true story. Now, you know, his front of his Harley isn't much different than mine, and you know, by looking at the front end of my bike, I'm thinking, okay, what's going to split a deer in half? I mean, seriously, I just don't see it as being a true story. But anyway, that was one of his claims to fame that I don't think anybody really believed it was true. And he always told the story with a little bit of a smirk. So, you know, okay, whatever. You know, I've had my situations out on the road too, though, where, you know, I've been riding the hog and, you know, had an animal come out in front of me. I mean, one time I was coming home after dark and I came around the curve and there was a whole family of raccoons in the middle of the road. Little ones, big ones, and I thought for sure I was going to hit them. And I braced myself for the impact, and somehow I went right between them and didn't hit any of them. So I was fortunate about that. I've had dogs charge out from, you know, yards. Never anything real threatening, but still it makes you aware of, you know, some of the hazards on the road there. Now, you know, when you travel, and I've had experiences with this too, when you go out west, like if you go to Yellowstone, of course, there's all kinds of wild animals in Yellowstone. There's the elk herds, and they're pretty proliferant there. There's also moose, there's bear, there's wolves, there's everything in Yellowstone, bison. And there's warnings all over the place that warn you about these animals. You know, don't approach them, stay away, don't feed them. In fact, when you stay at the National Park campground, they have signs right bolted onto the top of the picnic table that say, do not feed the animals, do not leave any food on your table, do not even leave your cooler sitting on your table, because these animals are dangerous, and they'll come right into your camp, and it might not end well. But you have to be careful when you're riding too on the roads there, for fear that, you know, you might run into one of these wild animals. I'm just thankful, you know, that I don't live in a place like Africa where I'd come around the corner and there'd be an elephant in the middle of the road with the big tusks, you know, blowing its trumpet. Oh, no, I'm sure that's happened to somebody, but that would be a very interesting encounter for sure. Um, and I talked the other day about in South Dakota, and you can do this any time of year, but I went out there for the Sturgis rally, and they have the Custer State Park has the wildlife loop where there's the free range buffalo. Free range, I mean, there's no fences, they can go wherever they want, and they most commonly, herd right across the street. So you could be riding around that loop, and it's very common that you'll be riding around the wildlife loop, and there's buffalo either right along the edge of the road or in the road. Now, some fools will try to negotiate through the herd on their motorcycle. I would have the tendency to wait until they cross the road, and then I will continue on. I can tell you another story, though, that I rode out to the Rocky Mountains. Now, I love the Rocky Mountains in Colorado, the Colorado Rockies. And one of my favorite places there is Rocky Mountain National Park. I rode my bike out there, and I stayed in Estes Park. Estes Park is on the east side of the Rockies, just north of Denver, Colorado. And it's kind of a nice little touristy town. They have all the little shops. You walk down the street and you'll see the window where they're making the saltwater taffy, and they're like stretching it on the machine, and it's going around and around. They have the little souvenir shops where you can go in there and buy your little token Rocky Mountain shot glass, or perhaps a kaleidoscope. All kinds of neat stuff to look at. I don't know that you'd buy any of it, but those souvenir shops are kind of interesting. They do have some unique things in there. So it's kind of a quaint little village there. And then not too far into the national park, the Rocky Mountain National Park, are some campgrounds. So I stayed at, I think it was called Moraine Campground, which is right inside Rocky Mountain National Park on the east side. And got a nice tent site there, set up my tent and everything. And it was still early evening, probably around 6, 7 o'clock, and I thought, well, I still got quite a few hours of daylight. I think I'll ride up the mountain and, see what I can see. So I hopped on the bike and I headed on up, and there's I think it's called the Skyline Drive or something, that goes all the way up over the top of the Continental Divide and back down into, I think, Colorado Springs on the west side of the mountains. It's quite a drive. It's very spectacular. I don't know if you've ever been to the Colorado Rockies, but these are real mountains. I mean, they get up above timberline, like where there's no more trees growing, and they're just jagged, rocky peaks with snow caps on the top, and it's breathtaking. The views are just incredible. To me, it's like a religious experience. I mean, you go into these nature areas like that, and you're just overwhelmed with the beauty and the whole experience. It's just like you feel it. It's incredible. Well, I rode the scooter on up, and I had all my leathers on because the sun was starting to go behind the mountains a little bit. It was still daylight, but you weren't getting the sunshine anymore. And when you're up there in the altitude, ooh, it gets cold. And so I made it up. I don't know. I probably rode, maybe 40 minutes up the mountain, and there was a parking area that I pulled into. I was the only one there. I parked my bike, and just over the hill in this little meadow was a herd of elk that were grazing. So I sat on my bike and I was watching the elk graze there, and this RV motorhome came and pulled into the parking lot too. And this family got out there. It was a husband and wife and a couple of kids. And we were watching the elk, and the elk were slowly working their way up towards the parking lot. Well, it was pretty obvious in looking at the herd, there was a couple little calves there with them, the newborns, maybe yearling. They're younger than yearlings. They were just like little fawn, like baby elk. Okay, I don't know what you call a baby elk, but Here in Ohio, the white-tailed deer, we would call them a fawn. At any rate, they were working their way up towards the parking lot, and this doe, the mother of these young ones, was all of a sudden alerted to the fact that we were in the parking lot and became alarmed. And she kind of charged up towards the parking lot, like, stay away from my kids. But not only that, she stood up on her hind legs and, pawed with her hooves like this at the air. And it was a warning to me, like, I'm going to kick the you-know-what out of you. So I backed up by my bike. Well, this family, they were over by their RV, and the guy said, you might want to come over here by our RV where you have a little more protection, because I'm not sure what her intentions are. And so I took him up on that. I walked over near their RV, and this herd of elk actually came up across the parking lot, went right past my bike and went over onto the other side and continued on down the mountain. It was pretty incredible, but it was an exhilarating experience, but kind of scary too. I mean, who would have thought that, you would think like an elk with the antlers and everything could come up and like, stab you with those antlers. And they could be very aggressive that way, but a doe who doesn't have any antlers, they can literally kill you and beat you to death with their hooves, and that's their defense. So, you have to be aware of that too. Well, the sun was going down, it was getting very cold, and so I jumped on the bike and I rode back down the mountain, back to my camp, and spent the night there at the National Park campground in my tent. Listen to the coyotes sing all night, or yip or bark or whatever they do. And they were noisy too. It sounded like they were all around me. Interesting place. Next day I rode up all the way to the top, over the Continental Divide and back, and it is just breathtaking. I'd like to go back and actually do some hiking there. Now, I probably told you too, when I was younger, in my younger years, I summited Long's Peak, right there in Rocky Mountain National Park, 3 different occasions. And that is an incredible hike. That hike, you have to start at like 6 a.m. and you don't get back till 6 p.m. It's an all-day trek. Up the mountain, all the way through the forest, and then you come out above timberline where it's all rocks and boulders, and you make your way up around the back of the mountain. Some of it's pretty harrowing, scary. You don't need rock climbing experience or anything. You just need to be a good hiker, have some good solid shoes, and you need to take some provisions with you, some food and some water. But when you get to the top, the reward is just remarkable. Now, you can't always make it to the top because the weather is unpredictable in the mountains. You could be halfway up the mountain and a storm could roll in. And when you're above timberline, you're exposed. It's all rocks. There's no place to hide. And lightning and thunder the lightning can be very, very hazardous. Not to mention, it can turn into snow almost immediately. And the conditions can become extremely icy and impassable. The one time I hiked up there, I was way up coming up to the back side of the mountain, and the hikers were coming back saying, you can't go, it's all ice up ahead, it's too dangerous. Well, the sun was out, it was a beautiful day like today, and it was warm, it was probably 80 degrees there, and I continued hiking up the mountain, and as I went, the ice had actually melted off, so I was able to make the summit that day, and that was pretty cool. But there's some really, really neat hikes there, even if you don't try to climb a mountain and you just take one of the other trails. There's one at Glacier Basin, which is really, really neat. It follows the stream that goes up into the mountains, and there's waterfalls, and it's just gorgeous, the most gorgeous thing. Anyway, so much for my daydreaming about Rocky Mountain National Park. Thanks for joining me today. I'm going to get myself dressed up for a ride and fire up the scooter and just head out into the countryside a little bit today and enjoy the spring weather while I can. If you haven't yet, give me a thumbs up and please subscribe to my channel. I'd love to have you on board. And until next time, cats, ride hard and die free.